Hello. We're back again with another interview today, this time with Shikha Gupta, who's the Executive Director of Get Us PPE. As a reminder, I'm Joe Wilson, one of the founders of the C19 Coalition, a nonprofit whose partners have helped get about 1 billion units of PPE to frontline workers since the start of the pandemic. So today we're going to cover a few different things, but really focusing on Get Us PPE, on their mission and how they see the next year playing out. So Shikha, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here. It's been a joy to be a part of the C19 Coalition for the past 9 months, and I'm really grateful for the work that we've gotten the chance to do together. Looking forward to what we can do next.
Yeah, same. I mean, for those who may be unfamiliar with our partnership, Get Us PPE was one of the first groups of the C19 Coalition worked with early on, and have just been really kind of the ideal partner throughout, keeping their finger on the pulse of what was going on the ground, getting PPE to people who needed it the most. So, I mean, kudos to you and your group. It's been extraordinary working with you all.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's been for sure a labor of love and definitely an adventure. But we're really thrilled with the progress that we've made and really impressed by the progress that you all have made with so many others in the coalition. On the Get Us PPE side, over the past 9 months, we've matched and delivered about 6.5 million pieces of PPE.
Wow.
Which is a lot, but then at the same time, it's remarkable how much work there remains to be done. So it's this constant forward motion, and we always feel like we're making progress and we're taking these huge leaps and strides towards this, nebulous end goal. But as the target keeps moving and changing, I think we're really fortunate to have a group of people who are in it with us and have been since day one. So it's nice to be able to call on or ask for help or advice from other teams that have been working on this in their own way.
Well, I think what's remarkable about your group is you work on some of the toughest challenges in the PPE market. Obviously the organization has evolved a bit, but the problem of getting, say, 100 million units of PPE into the United States is way different, and in some ways easier than getting 10,000 units of PPE to 5 different places spread out among rural communities. So it's just really remarkable. I mean, colloquially, we kind of call it like the long tail distribution problem. So, it's for those watching this, it's not like they had one big order of 5 million and that was it and they're done. It's in fits and starts, and it's definitely some of the most difficult work out there. So before we jump into some of the details of what you're working on now, maybe you can just give us a little bit of info on your background, how you kind of started working with and eventually running Get Us PPE, and where you want to take it from here.
Yeah, absolutely. I know we kind of jumped the gun there, but it's so exciting to get to talk about the collaboration piece of it. But my name is Shikha Gupta. I'm a physician by training and in my real life pre-COVID. And I came to Get Us PPE because my brother, who is a biomedical engineer, and we live on opposite coasts. So I'm in DC and he's at UCSF in San Francisco. And we never get to work together. And so we thought, here's a problem that we can both kind of sink our teeth into, and it really affects both of our spheres of influence. So we said, hey, let's figure out if we can find a solution to this PPE crisis. And like many of us, I think we thought it would be a really sort of short-term little adventure that we could do as the sibling pair. And we quickly found that it was much broader and deeper a problem than we ever thought possible. So when we learned about Get Us PPE and its very fledgling ideation days, we realized there's no point in reinventing the wheel. There are other groups doing similar work. So rather than all compete for, limited resources and work against each other. Let's just join forces and form this coalition similar to you all. So Get Us PPE actually started off as a coalition group where a number of different grassroots organizations who were interested in providing PPE free of charge to people who weren't able to afford it otherwise came together to really harness those resources and figure out how we could do better work together instead of apart. So I started off on day one at Get Us PPE as a volunteer, and then have worn many hats throughout the organization. Prior to serving as executive director, I served as vice president of our advisory board. So I've really had the chance to kind of work through the organization from top to bottom to understand what our tasks look like, what our challenges look like, and what some of the many paths forward might look like in the future. So it's been challenging, but extraordinarily rewarding, especially during a year when the desire to help and to make an impact has been, I think, greater than ever before. So it's given me the opportunity to work with a lot of brilliant and like-minded people.
That's great. And how does the work that you're doing on a daily basis now differ than when you first started working with Get Us PPE?
So in some ways, it's a lot of the same. It's a lot of really mobilizing volunteers who are the lifeblood of our organization. Although we do now have paid staff members as well, we continue to say that this is a volunteer-driven organization. And a lot of our last mile delivery, a lot of the outreach that we do to healthcare facilities and to donors, all of that relies on volunteer power. So a lot of my day is spent kind of harnessing that power and figuring out where best to direct it. And then really running around the organization, putting out fires and offering resources and taking down blockers where I can, which in some ways is very similar to what I started off doing. The difference now is we have the benefit of experience, 9 months of experience behind us, and we've had the chance to build out some pretty amazing technology. So we built out a proprietary matching algorithm that takes into account both the equity piece, which is primary and central to our mission, as well as efficiency. So we want to make sure when a donation of PPE comes to us, we're getting it out the door as fast as possible, but also making sure that the people who are getting it are the ones who genuinely need it the most. And the database that we've built, which contains 17,000 requests for PPE at this point, is the largest non-governmental database of its kind. So we have a really good eagle eye perspective of what PPE demand looks like in the United States.
That's fantastic. And when you think about equitable distribution, the first thing that pops up in my head is starting to think about the vaccine. Have you all considered application? I'm sure you've considered applications for the vaccine. Are you pursuing any of those? Are you working with the government on applying your technology to that program?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we had the chance to work with Project Warp Speed to advise on some of the work that we've done and practices and learnings that we think can be taken from PPE distribution and applied not only to vaccine distribution, but really to distribution of scarce resources of any kind. And so we think that that's one of the potential futures for Get Us PPE. We know that the PPE problem won't last forever in its current state, but we do think that we're going to continue to face more and more global problems, not just domestic, that put us in situations where we have limited supply and extreme demand. And one of the things that's really crucial is understanding who needs what when. And I think that's one of the problems that we didn't take very seriously as a country at the beginning of the PPE crisis and at the beginning of the COVID pandemic. So a lot of people who had a lot ended up with a lot more, which left the people who don't have anything to begin with even less. And that is not the way that we should be distributing scarce resources, particularly in a country where equity is such a focus for us. And so we want to make sure that we don't repeat those mistakes going forward and that we provide any tools or any advisement that we can to people who have the power to really implement those learnings on a larger scale.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, for those of us who have been in this for a while now, I feel like we can come across as a bit of a broken record in terms of repeating, hey, like these are the things you need to watch out for. This is how it can go off the rails. But, especially those simple principles are super important, especially when you're dealing with a group that maybe doesn't have context of what they're walking into or what needs to be done. So super, super critical work there.
Yeah, and I think, totally with you. It can completely seem like a broken record, but I think these are the primary principles of public health. So as a physician, and Get Us PPE is an organization founded by physicians, that's really the crux of what we do. And I think that's the angle that we came at this problem from, which was, we can all make do with fewer resources, but for us to completely leave out these large swaths of the population who weren't even being considered by the government as potentially needing resources, that's where it's unforgivable and unacceptable. And I think that's where a lot of this uncontrolled spread came from early on, and where people are really, really burnt out. They've been showing up to work every day without any protection or any hope of protection because they're deemed essential workers, but apparently not essential enough to receive the equipment that they need to keep them protected. And so I think a big part of this was our lack of foresight, not, as people working on this problem, but just in general in this country about who would need PPE. We thought it would be just academic centers or academic hospitals, maybe nursing home staff, but we didn't consider teachers and students and, rec centers and grocery store clerks and all of these other people who were deeply affected by the pandemic and are considered to be essential to our functioning as a society. So if they're essential, we should treat them that way.
It's a great point. And it reminds me, early on, there was a model that was circulated. I believe it started on the governmental side, which was trying to estimate the total need for PPE across the United States. And the number they floated was between 2 and 4 billion units of what was going to be consumed on an annual basis. And, obviously that is probably 2 orders of magnitude too low, like just dramatically undershot. And it speaks to the point that you're talking about, right? Like, people thought through, okay, medical workers are going to need PPE, doctors are going to need PPE. They didn't think it through enough to actually get them PPE, but they definitely flagged that it was an issue. But thinking through those essential workers and the broad classification of what essential means resulted in dramatically undershooting the amount that was required.
Yeah, and I think we're continuing to see that issue when we think about the numbers that are being floated for the Strategic National Stockpile, or even what Biden-Harris's transition team is considering and the COVID task force. We want them to have the best possible data that they can walking into the beginning of a new administration, and a chance for us to turn over a new leaf in a lot of ways. So if we're relying on the data and the collection that's been done over the past year by the Trump administration and the Trump teams, we're really doing a disservice to the next administration, because it doesn't take into account this full picture. And even the estimates that are supposedly take into account the non-medical workers, non-nursing home workers, they're still astoundingly low. And so we have missed the mark on a lot of things, not least of which is getting personal protective equipment to people, but even our ability to get, the appropriate number of people vaccinated by the end of the year. We're only able to do about 10% of that. Clearly, there's a disconnect between what the government is promising and what is happening in actuality. And a lot of the reason for that is a lack of consideration of all of these vast logistical challenges that you've had to deal with and I've had to deal with on the ground. But in theory, it's not something that pops into your mind immediately. So I think it's that understanding of what it's like putting this into practice and getting something from point A to point B in the middle of nowhere, Alaska, and all of the issues that you may run into in between.
I totally agree. I think that really speaks to the quandary that the new administration is in, which is, on the one hand, you want to build off what's been done before. You don't want to have to restart from zero to build up these systems that have been in large part redesigned over the last 9 months. However, by the same token, you can't just take everything at face value that it is accurate information, because if you're building this off of fundamentally bad information, you're going to lead to inequitable distribution. You're going to lead to people who are left behind. So it's, in some ways, it's a really difficult position. And of course, then you layer on, every blip is going to be magnified by the press in terms of, hey, it's a failure that we didn't have X people vaccinated by Y date. So it's an extreme challenge. And I think that's going to be one of the biggest issues with the administration that is balancing the build versus the like fundamentally reconstruct.
Yeah, and there is that, pressure that's put on by setting these very strict deadlines and guidelines. And I think part of the process has to be this allowance for flexibility. Although, sure, we'd love to get 20 million vaccines out by the end of the year, we're probably going to fall short of that. And I think setting those expectations publicly, although it may seem like a failure, it's going to seem like a much smaller failure in the grand scheme of things than promising to do it and not being able to deliver. And I think we want to avoid reinventing wheels wherever possible. That's been our motto since day one. So if there's information that we've collected on the Get Us PPE side, we are more than happy to find a way to share that data with the Biden-Harris team or with Trump's team, whoever could use it, and really do some good with it. But our goal at the end of the day is to make sure that whoever we give data to or whoever we share data with, that they're using it responsibly and really following through on the promises that we've made to people who register their need with us, which is that we take your needs seriously and we're going to make every effort possible to get you the equipment that you desperately need in this moment. So part of it, I think, is the fact that we're hitting this massive surge and spike in cases at a time when these two administrations are trying to transition. And there is so much that they're trying to learn on the Biden-Harris side. And part of the difficulty that they're going to face is, can we catch up and learn fast enough to really be an asset to a lot of NGOs that have been doing this for 9 months, when typically it's vice versa? How can an NGO be a value add to a government entity? So there is going to be that little bit of tug of war that I think happens necessarily at the beginning of a new administration. But my hope is that conversations will continue and they'll continue to pull in as many resources as possible and just hear people out, learn from people's institutional experiential knowledge about how they can apply what we've learned and do it better and not make some of the mistakes that all of us did early on.
Yeah, I think it's forgivable to make the mistakes once, especially given the pressure that we were under and the fact that we were doing it for the first time, right? But I think it's less forgivable to make the same mistakes twice, especially when so many lives are on the line.
Yeah, and they have this vast array of resources too. So it's a really great time to say, hey, let's pull in these logisticians in the military who are working for HHS, for Health and Human Services, and have such exquisite experience in doing this kind of work, and they're ready. They just need the appropriate information and really up-to-date knowledge about what kinds of challenges they're facing. And I think that's where we're really handicapping them. They don't have the information that they need to do the best possible job. So I think the tools are all there. The pieces of the puzzle are on the table. We just need to put them all in place. And I think this can be a chance to really, really, propel us forward and really prepare us well for the next time this happens, because this certainly won't be the last pandemic or global issue that we face, where the United States should be more prepared than we were this time.
Yeah, it certainly will not be, that's for sure. Well, I know we're getting towards the end of our time, but I do want to spend a little bit of time talking about your most recent initiative. Do you want to maybe just frame it up for us and tell us what you're working on these days?
Absolutely. So we always have a number of different irons in the fire, but a couple of things that we're working on that are top of mind. One is our PPE for Schools program. And this is a program that we're working on with maker communities around the United States and Title I schools. So looking forward to the spring semester as schools hopefully start to reopen on a large scale, we want to make sure that teachers, students, school nurses, aides, custodial staff, everyone from top to bottom at a school has the protective equipment that they need. And maker communities were some of the first ones to step up to the plate and volunteer their time and effort and material and brain power. So we really want to harness that. We want to give them funding to be able to produce PPE that's really specialized for different types of schools. So if we're working with an elementary school, we want to make sure that we're making child-sized masks and things that fit the kids and are able to mold and bend with their day. We want to put teachers in equipment that allows their students to be able to watch their lips move and to make those personal connections that they really need with their students. And the same is true for school nurses, who are, a vastly overlooked group of healthcare providers. And they've been really under-resourced since day one. And we want to make sure that when they walk back into schools for the spring semester, that they have everything that they need. And we've been working with a really impressive group of people from the National Association of School Nurses, many members of the C19 Coalition, as well as teachers and administrators from across the country to help us figure out the best plan going forward and how we can make the most impact there.
Well, thank you for all the work that you've done, not only recently with these new initiatives, but also since the beginning of the year when things were a lot more unsettled. I guess as we wrap things up, any final asks that you have for anyone watching, any actions you would like people to take?
Yes, so there are a few things that would be great to get help with. The first is, if you're looking for a way to give back or to volunteer, please come to us. If you go to getusppe.org, you can find plenty of volunteer positions that are open to you, especially if you don't have the means or the interest in donating financially. Giving your time is such a great way to give back right now. The second is, if you are an institution or a facility, or you run one that needs protective equipment, please register that need with us. It helps us get you what you need, but also provide the accurate data that we've been talking about through this call to the people who need it and who will be running the government in the future. And then the last piece, and Joe, this is one where C19 comes in, is we're always fundraising. Fundraising allows us to get PPE to where it's needed most in a quick, efficient way. And so C19 Coalition and Get Us PPE are working on a joint fundraiser right now, which you can find on both of our websites, where we're trying to raise $100,000 together, which can make a huge impact on the level of need that we're seeing in our database and the amount of PPE that we can push out to the people who aren't getting it from any other sources right now.
Excellent. And yes, to underscore that last point, please donate if you can. There's a lot of people who desperately need it. We're proud to be partnering with you all in moving this fundraiser forward, and I'm confident we'll be successful over the next couple of weeks. So with that, Shikha, thank you so much for joining me today, and looking forward to working more together in the new year.
Thank you so much, Joe. It's been a pleasure, and I'm excited to see what we can do next.